Good morning, everybody. I'm Tlish, and you're watching Coffee and Clicks. Um, I just wanted to thank everybody that's viewing on YouTube, at home, or wherever you are viewing Coffee and Clicks and tuning in every so often. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy my content and enjoy today's episode of Coffee and Clicks. And then, what are your favorite game elements? I mean, you mentioned you hated ID cards, and I think a lot of people are there with you on that. Um,
I'm actually in the rare camp. I actually liked team bases. I'm not the only one. I actually thought it was interesting. I
team
thought they had a
bases.
weird, interesting, unique gameplay style.
So how do team
Uh,
bases work? Because I was not around during team bases.
okay, so basically, the way a team base works is instead of generally speaking, what happens is normally you pick a bunch of characters and then you add them together and they become a team. That's how you build your force. Team bases are you play the team base and they sort of built in have certain characters that are part of their force. And what can happen? So what happens is during the game, the base itself is sort of the team acting together as one character, and so it has its own dial for it. And usually, I think they're all 2x4s in terms of the size of the dials. And so what would happen is you'd have this cool, you know, the typical one was like the Justice League was the most powerful one for a long time until zombies came out. And basically, the way it worked is you paid 300 points for like this 11-click dial with insane stats, and what it could do is it had a bunch of special, like, because it's a team, it gets to do like more than other characters. So they had all these extra effects. So one of them was they could take parts of the team that are on the team base and send them off as individual characters. And so you got to add characters to your force that way. It was called Solo Adventure, I think. So you'd take a member of the team. So say you're playing the Justice League team base, you could take a power action to take the Green Lantern that was on the team base, take it off the team base, and put it on his own character, and he becomes a character on your force. Uh, and then the other thing it did, that the thing that really made it have to get nerfed in the first instance, was the way it interacted with theme originally, and the way one of its special effects is working together. So working together, if you're familiar with the multi-attack mechanic at all,
Yeah.
basically multi-attack is you take one action to take multiple actions.
Mm-hmm.
Working together was the same thing. So working together, the way it worked originally was for every 100 points or fraction thereof of the point value of the team base, you took one power action to take that many actions, basically. So for 300 points, the Justice League team base, who was already like this 12-4 perplex outwit running shot brick with 11 clicks, every time it took an action, it was taking 3 actions. So it was going, turn 1, pass, I guess, and then turn 2, full move up 10, running shot up 5, shoot you, and then shoot you again.
What, a 2x4? The 2x4 base was running shotting 10
Yeah, all the way
squares.
across the map for one action. Right? I mean, it was crazy, but it was cool. I liked it. I don't know. People hated him. People didn't like him. I liked him. I'm in the minority, and I know it. And so those were the
How
main
many
things.
points was the team base?
300. It was your team.
So that was your
Called it
entire
team
team. Was just
base.
a 2x4 figure
Yeah, and then
on the
whatever
map.
and the extra figures you could generate during the game,
Okay.
because they can separate the team members off themselves.
Okay, and so you would collect different figures to put in the team base, and you could mix match.
I mean, there wasn't that much collecting involved. I mean, so like the Justice League, there were 7 figures
Okay.
that went with it, and 3 of them came with the team base.
Okay.
So I think Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman came with the team base. The other 4 characters, what is it? Flash, Green Lantern, Cyclops, or not Cyclops, Cyborg, and who am I missing? Flash, Green Lantern, Cyborg, Aquaman, of course, were actually characters in the set, just normally. And so you'd have to pick them up on their own. I think Aquaman was like a common. So, I mean, it's not like all of them were hard to get. And so you'd have one of each of them then on the team base. And then you have I don't know if you know the HeroClix dials. I think they do that now for like the paintable ones, where like the character can actually come off the base. That was how they worked. And so you could plug the character into the team base. And then when they went on the solo adventure, you unplug them from the team base and plug them back into their own dial
Okay.
to make them back into a whole character to be able to use on their own. Stuff like that.
It sounds kind of cool.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I thought it was cool. I mean, I liked it. So, but I'm in the minority on that. Maybe that's why I like Jason so much. He feels like a team base. Like he does way too many things in a turn, and then he makes dudes that go off on their own adventure.
So speaking of like good versus like bad figures, what do you think of Galactus as the Herald? Are you going to use him in upcoming builds, or do you think he's terrible, good, awesome?
Oh, 25. The 25-point Herald dial is ridiculous.
Okay.
The Herald dial itself is fine, but the Void dial is crazy. So when you play him at the Herald dial, you also get the Void dial.
Okay.
And the Void dial,
the elemental
Void dial.
converter.
Yeah. That's I don't know. I never remember the name. Yeah.
Okay.
The one that deals them damage every turn. So you get the converter as well, just because you have the Galactus on the sideline. And so like that thing is disgusting. So like it's gonna be hard to not build with that, just because it's so good at punishing like a lot. So like right now, like I love that as like if I'm gonna be playing Vulture, that's an effect I love, because all the only defense you have against Vulture right now is barrier, and I'm like, well, if you want to sit there behind a barrier, you could just take free damage all day.
Right. Okay. But it takes a little while to ramp that up, though. I mean, I don't
It's like three turns.
Okay.
Before it starts. So it starts. So I think the count is it's blank 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 1. So at the end of your fourth turn, well, so if you're going first, let's say, at the end of your turn 1 it goes to click 2. At the end of your turn 2 it goes to click 3. At the end of your turn 3 it goes to click 4, and your opponent starts taking damage on their turn. I mean, that's not that far in. That's on your opponent's turn 3 potentially.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's assuming that nothing got killed. Because if you kill something with the Herald, then it clicks it up an extra one that turn.
Mm-hmm.
I think that sounds right. So I mean, that's all really good. That's all really powerful. Seems crazy. Being able to give Power Cosmic and basically a minimum 5 range to a character of your choice seems fine. It probably has its uses, has characters that it matters for. The random powers you get from the Herald dial seem fine. I don't know exactly where I like the Herald dial the most, but the Elemental Converter is just bonkers. I don't really even care about making Galactus during the game. Like that's if you happen to be that far on the Herald dial, whatever. But the Elemental Converter is easily worth 25 points.
Okay.
That thing is just such a beating.
Yeah, and you think that's worth 25 points is a better 25 points spent than like equipment and stuff like that?
I mean, it depends, but yeah, a lot of the time I think it will be. Just because it does one of two things. Either at its worst case, it's not worth the 25 points. Its worst case is basically your opponent's playing a super aggro team that just moves up immediately, in which case it does nothing.
Okay.
But the reason you're playing it is not for those teams. In those teams, okay, sometimes you have a figure that doesn't do everything that you want it to because there's a particular matchup it doesn't matter in. I mean, in those matchups, you just need to go in and engage with them. Fine. The place where it has a home is when you're using it to punish the turtley teams. That's where the converter is at its best. Well, and the other side of it is if they're just moving up, then probably you're going to be engaging, which means the Herald dial is ticking up. So it sort of has that both sides of it, because the Herald dial only ticks up if you're within so many squares at the end of the turn. Or I think if the Herald KO'd something. So like if they're moving up and engaging, well, then your Herald dial's ticking. So, you're getting to hypersonic on like one turn. The second click of it is hypersonic, I think. And then you still get some movement attacks for a few clicks, and then you get a great support powers. Like it seems fine if they're engaging. And then if they don't engage, you get to go, okay, you can't stay there too long because you're just going to deal free damage, and I'm okay with that too. And so that's sort of where it is. And 25 points, I mean, yeah, that's a fine effect to have for it. And the fact that you get to basically protect something's powers by giving a power cosmic as well seems great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I'm excited to use Galactus for sure. I mean, I've already used him in like a casual type game, like a gigantic 900-point battle. But I haven't used him in competitive yet. I don't think many people have because he just kind of became legal, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as speaking of, so also maps. What do you think about like? Because I already asked you your process as far as team building, but I mean, in general, for general strategy, and I'm not talking about vulture teams, because Because I mean, obviously with your team, it's not themed. You
You,
usually
you,
not,
you lose map.
you usually lose map. But I mean, your strategy in general for picking maps, like how do you go about picking the
So
right map?
the answer is there's two sides to it. So side number one, there are certain types of teams that are built around using certain maps. And in those, I mean, it's part of the team building process. As you're constructing the team, you know what the map you're playing on is the vast majority of the time. So, for instance, something like a Barclay team or most Tri-Sentinel teams, like, you know, the first two maps on your map list are probably going to be Hedge Maze and Ancient Hold. Because, like, part of the point of playing those teams is to be on those maps and to punish your opponent because you got to put them on those maps. Because you get to take advantage of the terrain. So that's like the first kind. Those are usually, you usually understand what's going on there. It's okay. The purpose of the team is to use this kind of map, so you already know which maps you want. For other teams, basically the main thing you're looking for is for maps to serve for specific purposes. So, for instance, if what you need, if you're going first, you kind of should know what the games look like. So, for instance, if you know there are going to be certain matchups where what I really need to do is I need nothing to happen for 2 or 3 turns while I set up, and then I think I can get in regardless of what the terrain looks like. Well, then you might want to play something like an Ancient Hold. Because an Ancient Hold is basically you have all this terrain in the way, it's indoor, it's blocking, you can't do anything. So that serves that purpose.
In the case that your team has a lot of range or something, or
it doesn't really matter what the reason is. So, for instance, like if you have a bunch of equipment you absolutely have to equip, and there's a matchup where it's like, okay, I know that there's some matchups where if because it's outdoor or whatever and they're playing a bunch of colossals, like if I just sit there and equipping for a turn, they're just going to beat me over the head because they have more reach than me.
Okay.
So what I need to make sure I have the choice that when I'm playing against them and I win map, I'm able to pick something like Ancient Hold where I know I'm getting 3 turns unmolested, and then like I can send in my Hulk or whatever, random punchy Dorcas, or just even something like the Title Kang. Like one of the ideas I was looking at with him is you play like a map like an Ancient Hold with him, with the idea being, okay, it's going to take them 4 or 5 turns to get across the map. That gives me a lot of turns to place the free time markers on the map. And so and then by the time they can get in, if they ever put anything too close, I can spend a whole turn and hit them 5 times with Kang. Like you can do stuff like that. The other big thing is you're really just looking for either open maps so that your opponent doesn't have anything in the way of you getting to them. I mean, that's really what it is. You want open maps or closed maps, depending on what you're doing. If you're going after the opponent really quickly, then you want an open map. You want something like WWE Arena, where there's nothing on the map, nothing in your way, nothing getting in your lines of fire, nothing occupying squares that you need. There's nothing between you and the opponent. That's the main thing you're looking for. And right now, we have WWE Arena, which is about as open as it's ever gotten. There aren't too many more open maps than that in Click's history. And then the other side of it is the closed maps, which is like your Ancient Hold, trenches, hedge maze, that type of stuff, where you have terrain features in the way that you can asymmetrically use to benefit you because your team is built to abuse them and punish your opponent for having to play around them. Unless you have something like that, the only other thing you're really looking for is really unique features. So, for instance, the 4x4 corner starting areas are a unique feature. Like very few maps have that. And they really change the starting layout in terms of how close your team is to your opponent. Because normally, you start in row 2, they start in row 23, you've got 20 squares between you. But if you're starting in row 4 and they're starting in row 20, you only have like 18 squares between you or 16 squares between you. So it actually changes the fundamental math of the map. So that would be something to look for. Something like you happen to know you have a bunch of hypersonic, you're definitely going to want a lot of elevation changes because hypersonic plays well with those. Things like that. Particular types of terrain that you have characters that care about. So if you have Null, you want something with obscuring terrain because he cares about it specifically. And then the other thing you're really looking for is just making sure you have sightlines to do all the things you want. So one of the big ones I like in general is Metal Arena because it happens to be a relatively nice, clean outdoor map that has sightlines that mean that you can blow up opposing terrain no matter where they place it. You're never going to have a square on the map that if they place an object there, there's going to be some inherent blocking in the way or elevated that's in the way of getting that line of fire.
There's another map that has elevated like Metal Arena. It's from ABPI, right?
Well, Galador is sort of the opposite.
No, not Galdor. The other one. There's one Great Mound. The Great Mound.
Great Mound's also sort of the opposite because Great Mound, you can't shoot down the whole map because the elevated is in like a pocket built on itself.
Okay.
right, on the right side. So if you look at the way that is, that's actually built like a mountain, right? You have the elevation 1 on the lower part, and then you have elevation 2, and then on top of that is 3, and on top of that is 4, and you don't start on the 4. So the thing about Metal Arena is that you can start on the elevation 3, or I guess elevation 3. You can start on the elevation 3 and shoot across the elevation 3. You're never going to have anything in the way of that. Same with the 2 and the 1. There's always a way that you can basically be shooting straight through it. With the mound, it's the opposite. 1, there's a bunch of blocking on the map, which gets in the way of lines of fire. And then 2, the elevated isn't in the same type of positioning because you start on 1 and then you move up to 2 and move up to 3. You don't start on 3 and shoot to 3. So that's sort of a very different arrangement of the elevated there.
Okay. And so, like, one thing I was thinking about was when you said like if you're an aggressive team, or if you're going to just run up and attack, then you should choose an open map. But I was, one thing that I've always been kind of cautious about was that if I have an open map and I'm using kind of an alpha striking team or an aggressive team that just wants to move up, that if I move up too far, I'm going to get hit because it's a wide open map. So, like, don't I want to look for, like, maybe place to hide behind or something like that?
That sounds like you're not an alpha strike team. I mean, you're truly an alpha strike team if you're hitting first no matter what.
Okay.
if you're not hitting first, then you're not the alpha strike team.
Okay.
Right? That makes you the person receiving the attack, not getting the attack. So if you have to worry about whether you're receiving an attack, well, then you're not in the position of being the alpha strike team. Because sometimes just because you're aggressive doesn't mean you're the one attacking first.
Okay.
Right? Your team can be aggressive, but it doesn't mean you're attacking first. Now, there are some times where you can attack first because of certain terrain features. So I think Alyssa made pretty good use of, like, the watchtower to do stuff like that. She's been playing in a bunch of events, something like Chase, Widow, Voyager, Medusa, Micron, Steve, I think was the list. Yeah. And so she goes to Watchtower, and then when she wins, she goes first, and she basically goes about halfway up the map into a room that's closed off. And so it's hard to get in there, so she gets to make use of that terrain defensively to go on offense. But she also, like, has to use that in order for her strategy to work. Otherwise, she is getting shot, like you're saying. Mm-hmm. But for a team that has full map strike reach, like, you're always able to threaten them if you have full map strike range. And so you want nothing in the way. You just want to get them. And so that's sort of the difference there, is being aggressive is not quite the same as being an alpha strike. An alpha strike is literally the entire point of my team is no matter what you do, I want to be able to attack you. That's the core premise of it. So that's like your Batman type idea, right? Yeah, no matter what your opponent does,
really,
I have the
like
range.
2 figures that do that, though, is Vulture and Batman, kind of. Or
that's not true. A lot of stuff can do it with, like, a TK plus a running shot.
Okay.
And that's historically the case, that things like that are available. The question is how good they are.
All right.
That's usually the bigger problem. Like Adam does it. Like he's the other big one in a lot of cases. So I mean, the thing, if for teams like that, you want something really open. Yeah, if you are playing something that needs a prep move turn, whole different story. I generally consider those to be more of like a mid-range idea. You have things you can do defensively, you have things you can do offensively, and you can try and kind of try and pick and choose. But you don't necessarily do either of them particularly well in terms of your ability to threaten it from any position. And so you sort of have to commit to what you're doing in that game. That's sort of the difference there in my mind.
Okay. Yeah, so that really helps because, I've always had trouble. I tend to, as far as me as a HeroClix player myself, I kind of bridge the gap. I like to play casual and I like to play competitive. But I always had problems with choosing the map. That's one of the things that always...
Yeah, and an important note is it is matchup dependent. It's not like, oh, you're always going to go to the open map. It's like, no. Depends on the game. In the games where you're attacking first, well, then you want the open map because you want nothing between you and them, right? It's the games where you're maybe not attacking first. Well, then you're not attacking first. It's a different game. So you need a different map for that, which is also part of your selection of 3 maps should serve different purposes. So you have the one map where you look at the opponent and you say, there's no way they're attacking me first. I'm always going to get them first. I have way bigger reach than they do, right? Then you just want an open map. They can't do anything to stop you. There's nothing in the way. You move up to however far it is you need to get the rest of the map, and they can't get you first, so you just get them. And then you may have a second map that's like, okay, they have actually a little bit bigger reach than me, but I get to pick the map. So I want something with a bit more terrain features in the way that I can leverage to my advantage, so that either it evens out the reach because both of us have really small reach, or it turns out I have some way around it that they don't. So like if I have improved elevated of some kind and they don't, then I can abuse the elevated features on a map like trenches, something like that.
If you have a bigger reach than your opponent, what you want to go on an open map or?
Yeah, generally speaking, because they're not going to get you first.
And let's say you have like a team with like, let's say you're in a sealed tournament and you have a team with like all close attack figures like blades.
Then you want something as close in as possible, generally.
Okay, like charge flurry or whatever.
Yeah, generally speaking, you want the. It's not the more close combat because like Vulture's close combat, but he really attacks across the map. The bigger the strike range, generally speaking, the less terrain features you want because terrain features tend to get in the way.
Okay.
The lower the strike range, the more terrain features you want to have more things in your opponent's way.
That's really interesting. What are your feelings on I know you mainly play competitive, but what are your formats on things like Pauper and Sealed? Those are actually competitive formats, but what are your feelings on Pauper? And
I at least as it existed in the season from last year, I never liked Pauper. I don't think the format's fun. I don't think it's interesting. I don't think there's any fun or interesting teams in it. I think it's just an unfortunate. The pool's just too small.
Okay,
and I think some of the choices on what they did and didn't allow sort of steered it in that way. So for instance, like they allowed the 2x2 uncommons, which are really rares if you look at like their distribution compared to other pieces, but they didn't allow like OP kit figures that everyone has. And so it ended up really narrowing what was and what wasn't allowed so much that it sort of created this weird, uninteresting metagame, at least in my view. They also had this weird problem they ran into right away. They realized, it turns out rarity is not an indicator of how powerful something is. So like they immediately had to go to Highlander because they realized otherwise everyone's just going to play like 6 Medusas.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's just not at a place where the figure pool is deep enough with just commons and uncommons to make it work. I think maybe if you did commons, uncommons, and rares, that might be enough.
But then everybody would play just rare. Well, no.
That's not true at all.
Yeah,
most rares are terrible.
Yeah. There are, yeah. You're right. I mean, like, rarity is not an indicator of necessarily how good a piece
a figure is. Like, as a general rule, super rares tend to be a little bit better than the lower rarity.
Yeah, I mean, that's
generally
isn't it intended to be that way though? When they develop the game, don't they intend super rares to be better than rares?
I mean, when they make them better, I assume so.
Okay.
They certainly intend for them to be less common.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't think that it's a power level thing necessarily. I think just as a historical matter, there is generally seems to be a pushing of the power level at super rare a little bit compared to other pieces. So for instance, if you look at a set and you're looking at what do I want to open in sealed, generally speaking, somewhere in your top 5 figures is going to probably be 3 super rares, something like that. Maybe you'll have chases, maybe you won't, depending on the set, because chases are very hit or miss. Sometimes the chases are powerful and sometimes they're unplayable. Mm-hmm. So typically you'll have quite a few, like generally speaking, you're going to have 3 of your most powerful figures in the set are going to be at the super rare rarity. That's usually going to happen. Sometimes you'll have a common that's like the best figure in the set.
Yeah, I mean,
or it's
Batman Prime. Batman Prime's a common Prime. He's only valued at like, I mean, you can get him for really cheap online and stuff like that. But he's just an amazing piece. But you know, why does WizKids make that piece at that rarity and not make it at like a super rare?
I don't know that there's that much thought given to it. I mean, there doesn't really need to be. I mean, the primes are sort of separate anyway. They are rarer than other figures. I think even the common prime is about as rare as your normal super rare. I think that's right. I don't think it's much more rare than that, but I don't think it's like less. I don't think it's more common than your normal rares, because you still can only get like 1 per brick, right, at most. Whereas the rares you can get like 5, depending on which one it is. So I mean, there's that. Like it is an actual higher rarity for the primes, but I mean, just looking at commons, I mean, like Cable, that piece is crazy at common. For 75 points.
The Cable with the holograms, right?
Yeah, that piece is insane.
Okay.
Like, how is that a common? Like, it's got a free TK action it can use every turn, and it's got a stop click. Like, that piece is ridiculously good, and it's a common. I mean, like if you're playing sealed in X-Men, like opening 3 cables is one of the best things you can open in terms of power level.
Okay.
Like it's up there because like it's one of the best 100 points you can spend in the format. Now, if you only open 1 cable, it's not as good.
Yeah.
But I mean, so that's sort of how it works out. Like the best 2x2 in X-Men in terms of sealed is Onslaught. Onslaught's the best piece in the set.
Okay.
And it's at the lowest rarity of that slot.
You think Onslaught's the best piece in the entire set?
For sealed, absolutely.
For sealed, okay.
Yeah, in sealed, he's just the best figure, I think. Like he's just so powerful. I mean, he's ridiculous in sealed. That's why. In constructed, he's not anywhere near as good. But yeah, no, I mean, so in terms of power level, it's and he was the best. He was basically one of the 3 best things in Pauper, right? The Pauper format ended up being like what, him, Nimrod, and the Hulk.
I've actually thought about like with Pauper that maybe it would be more fun if they made it commons, uncommons, and rares. Like I actually thought that.
That was I think the rares are fine. I think the other thing is they also just need to be more consistent about how they're treating the 2x2s. My basic theory has been 2x2 should be treated as 1 rarity higher than their actual rarity, because if you really think about it, like an uncommon 2x2 is a rare. Yeah. You get 1 per booster.
Yeah, like Onslaught's really good, Juggernaut's really good, or who else is an uncommon?
Proteus. Orange Proteus is insane.
Oh yeah, Proteus is really good with Onslaught. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely, particularly in a Highlander format, having a bigger pool is important. So I think opening it up to rares would be good. I think, like, if you're going to have LEs apply at all, because they had WWE, then I think you got to, like, let the OP get stuff in.
What do you think about sealed? Do you enjoy sealed?
Depends on the set. Some sets are great, some sets are terrible.
Okay.
Like, Guardians of the Galaxy from 2014 or whatever, like, that set was awful in sealed. It was such a weird set in the way the distribution was. One, it had a bunch of alternate versions that weren't like prime rarity. They were just like, oh, you get half as many of each sides of this. So it made the collation really strange. And then it just had like a bunch of pieces that were lopsided on power level. Like you in the same set, you had like uncommons that are like a top 5 piece in the set, along with like super rares that were completely unplayable. Like the set just made no sense in that regard. And like the power level between the best stuff in that set and the worst stuff in that set was huge. Whereas like something like the XXS, like that set was great for sealed. Everything was playable pretty much. Like there was a couple of rares that weren't so good. Like Gold Balls was not great, but pretty much the whole set was like at least interesting and had something to do and had a place in the format.
Yeah.
And there was nothing that was so lopsidedly overpowered that it's like, okay, you got that, you won. It's like Kid Gladiator was probably the best piece in the format, maybe him or the Teleporting Magic, and they weren't that much better than everything else in the set.
Yeah, I really enjoyed. I remember XXS X-Men Xavier School. That was an enjoyable sealed format.
Yeah.
Yeah, I played in. I think I played in a tournament, a sealed tournament with XXS, and it was really good. I played in a sealed with Rebirth, and I thought that one was weird because the points distribution was like you had a lot of high point costing figures, and then a lot of like I think a lot of the figures were. It was just hard to build a sealed team with at least what I pulled, but then I also pulled pretty well. So, but I don't remember.
I didn't play any Rebirth at all, so I don't know. But I do remember like ABPI was sort of in the Guardians of the Galaxy camp where I was like, man, why in the world is Medusa an uncommon?
That Medusa's insane. Yeah, that Medusa's really good. Like
she's preposterous and sealed. Like she's like the best piece in the set in some ways. And she's an uncommon. So it's like, okay, so like for teams, it's like if you have a team and you open no Medusas, you're at a real disadvantage over all those teams that opened up like 4, which is not implausible at that rarity. In 6 boosters, I think we had like 3. For me, George, and I forget who our third was in that year. So yeah, I mean, like that set wasn't great for sealed in my view. And then on the other side of it, we had I actually really liked X-Men, despite the fact it was a bit lopsided. It was still pretty fun. Although that might be because I opened Onslaught. Maybe that's why it was fun.
Yeah, and do you enjoy? I mean, are you a comic book fan? Do you like the X-Men characters and stuff like that? Or?
Not really. No, I got into comic books a little bit because I played HeroClix. not the other way around.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, as far as oh, so other, I mean, I know you've mentioned to me before, you don't like battle royals.
I don't like that style of multiplayer in general, where you have multiple players in the same game. I mean, I'll play a battle royale at a convention. It's not to play the game. It's just to hang out with people.
Right.
It's
Okay.
more about hanging out than actually playing a game. If I'm
Okay.
going to actually play the game, I don't want to do multiplayer because the biggest problem with it is the HeroClix already can have a long time between when I do a thing and when I get to do things again. Like when my next turn starts from when the last one ends. That can already be a long time depending on what's going on, even in sealed. In a battle royale type setting where you've got 3 whole players' turns before your next turn,
Yeah, you're doing
that
a
could
lot
be an
of sitting
eternity.
there. Yeah.
I mean, I've definitely had battle royale games where, like, on my 3rd turn, I had to clear, and I don't think I took another turn that game.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Like, and it just feels terrible. Like, you just don't feel like you get to do anything. That's my general opinion on that.
Yeah, I wonder if battle royale is better suited for like home games, like casual style games where you just don't time it and you just play it out.
I mean, I don't disagree with that. But even then, like, okay, so there's no time limit. Fine, I'm still gonna be waiting 20 minutes for my turn.
Yeah, true, true. And have you ever tried skirmish? I
I have not played like the multiplayer one they try to do, but I did look at it. Like, I actually think 1v1 skirmish would be a sweet format. That
Yeah.
sounds awesome. I really do like the fundamental changes to the game it imposes. I think they're interesting. I think they change things in a lot of ways that people won't really understand their impact until they start playing it. Like, there's a lot of chess principles that come into it because it becomes more that I do a thing, you do a thing type dynamic.
Yeah.
So, like, there's a lot of things that, like, when you're playing a lot of other strategic games that apply in all of them. So it applies in shogi, it applies in chess, applies in certain variations of like Stratego. It can apply, which is like discovered attacks, where you move one piece, which enables another piece to then attack.
Okay.
In HeroClix, that really doesn't come up because you get to do 3 things in a turn, right? So you just do it all at once. So you don't need to move one thing out of the way, like, and then spend a whole turn doing that to open up. You do it at the same turn, so it's not like it changes anything. Whereas in skirmish, it's like, okay, you really have to think, well, this move action is really not just a move action. It's really repositioning the line of fire on this other character for my next action.
I would almost like to see, because I know like part of the skirmish rules is that you're not allowed to take more than one free action per
Yeah,
round.
so basically the way it works is you have turns and rounds. So a turn is you do 1 costed action and 1 free action. And then after everyone takes however many turns it is in the round restarts, and then basically what you normally treat as a turn is what a round is. So, for instance, normally you only get like 3 actions a turn. So the way it'll work in skirmish is you'll get 3 turns during each round of skirmish, after which any clearing occurs, and then the next round begins, and then you can take an action with the same character again in the next round. So it further compartmentalizes, essentially, and moves up where the turn and round is at 1 step. And so what'll happen is, for instance, so say I think it's 3. I could be getting the math wrong. So if I'm getting the numbers wrong, just ignore that. Don't worry about that for a second. So the idea is you'll get 3 actions per round. And the way the actions work is I'm going first. So I take a costed action and I take a free action, and then I'm done for now. And then it's your turn. It's your turn for this round. Then you do a costed action and a free action, and then your turn is done, but it's the same round. So then I'm allowed to take another costed and free, but it can't be with the same character, just like in a normal game of HeroClix.
Okay.
Because we're essentially taking a simultaneous turn, is the idea. But you can't do it truly simultaneous, so I do a thing, you do a thing, I do a thing, you do a thing instead. And so it makes it more able to react and interact with what your opponent's doing because of that. So, for instance, like normally what you do in a game of HeroClix, if you had a TK, be like, well, TK a guy up and then running shot you. It's like, well, that's not so easy in skirmish. I TK my guy up, you're going to get a whole action to just run a guy adjacent to him.
Yeah. I'd actually like to see, because I know like some things, like some interactions like that don't really work as well in skirmish, but I'd like to see them do like maybe a starter set dedicated to skirmish with like actual figures that were just dedicated to skirmish. I thought that might be interesting.
I mean, I feel like it works just fine with the existing stuff. I don't think you need anything special for it.
Okay.
The other big thing is it avoids some of the annoying things that happen in normal games, which is like, okay, so I have a team with 10 characters and they all have sidestep. I got to sidestep 10 things every turn. In skirmish, you actually you sort of have a hard limit on how many free actions you can take, no matter how many you have access to, because you're only allowed to take one for every turn you get within the round. And then once the round restarts, it's as if it was the next turn of the game in a normal game of HeroClix. So say you have your 3, you're only going to get 3 free actions every quote unquote turn.
So if you have
that you would normally
use. What happens with leadership? Do you get an extra?
Leadership gives you a bonus turn.
A bonus turn that your opponent does not necessarily get.
Correct. So we both start out with the 3 turns in the round. If I have leadership, then I'll get a 4th turn. If you don't have leadership, you don't get your 4th turn. If I then also have fates, like 5 fates, so I get the extra 2 actions.
Yeah.
Then I'll get a second bonus turn and then a third bonus turn. Okay. Because it's plus 2 action total, and you won't get those bonus turns.
And then when it's time to go back to turn 1,
and then the round restarts, right? Mm-hmm. And then all of those counts refresh.
And then you go again, or
it depends on who's player 1.
Okay.
So, for instance, if I'm player 1 and I have the extra 3 actions, yeah, you could be taking 4 in a row there. Yeah. Because you go first, then so if I'm the player 1 in this situation, I go first, my opponent goes second, I go third, my opponent goes 4th, I go 5th, they go 6th. Then I go 7th, 8th, and 9th because I have a leadership and they don't, and I have the plus 2 actions and they don't. And then I go first in the next round.
And have you tried this out? Or I mean, it seems really like leadership and things like that, extra actions, it seems really powerful.
Yeah, they're powerful. That's fine.
Okay. But they're not too powerful. Yeah, okay.
I have no idea. They're not that easy to use. So, like, if you think about the extra action effects, most of them require, like, you can't really do them in practice. So, for instance, there's, like, the Justice League one from the starter set. Mm-hmm. You can never activate them. You can never get the extra action off them because they need 6 characters, I think. And you're only allowed 5 characters in skirmish.
Oh, got it. Okay. Yeah.
Right, so like you can't do that. So you could do the fates. You could play 65-point fate and 4 baby fates.
But then that's
your whole team.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So it's not like it's easy to get them, and there's not that many extra action effects. I mean, there's leadership.
Right.
There's leadership, and then some Justice League stuff. Like you can play Power Woman at 25. You're playing this piece that sits in the middle of the map and does nothing, but gives you 1 extra action. I think that's a fair trade-off. Mm-hmm. And it's usually a 200-point format. Okay. So 25 points is kind of a big commitment there.
Right. Okay.
And like as soon as she dies, you don't get the extra turn anymore.
And are you allowed to play Colossals in skirmish, or?
I think you're allowed 1. They used to be there was no limit, and now you're allowed to play 1 non-1x1. So you can have 1 multi-base.
And it can be retail or anything like that.
I mean, anything you want, yeah, but only 1.
Okay.
And even stuff like that, like it's actually a lot trickier to use them than you'd think. So, for instance, as a general rule, anything that mentions anything that mentions this turn becomes this round in skirmish. So for something like a Dark Phoenix where it talks about placement, if on my first turn of the round I TK something, well, that is a placement for that whole round. So my Dark Phoenix can no longer retail even if she's directly attacked until the next round starts. And so the sequencing there can be really important. Same with a carry. And because of that, it makes stuff like that tricky because they have only if something hasn't been placed this turn for things like the retails. Okay. Similarly, because of the free action limitations, like it's very, very hard to like say perplex up Dark Phoenix's attack twice and then retail. Well, it's going to take you 3 turns if you want to do that. Because you need to spend 2 whole turns of free actions to do it before you can even activate the 3rd one.
Oh wait, but
because each turn only has 1 free action with it.
Oh,
right?
Each turn only has 1 free action with it, so you actually can't. Oh,
right.
Okay. Yeah, because
right. So you can't like perplex twice and then retail because you're turn 1 of the round.
You can't do 2 costed actions, but you can't also do 2 free actions even if they're from separate characters because you're only using 1 character at a time.
Well, it's not 1 character at a time. So you can do a free action from a different character than you take the costed action with each turn. So there's the there's the turns and rounds, and we use them differently than normal.
But you can only do 1 free action per force per turn.
Yes, correct. Each of your turns is 1 costed and 1 free.
Okay,
And
but
then you get 3 turns per round by default.
I was thinking per figure you only get one cost
No,
advantage
no,
for
no,
free.
no, no, no.
Okay.
It's the whole team. So like so say we're in the middle of the game and you begin the round. On your first turn of the round, you get 1 free action and 1 costed action. And then I get a free action and costed action.
Okay.
And then you get another free action costed action.
That's
So if
really
you want to do
interesting.
something like you want to retail on them with the Dark Phoenix, but you want to get her attack to a 13, she's going to have to wait 2 costed actions and 2 free actions of both you and your opponent before she can do that.
Yeah, and by that time she's dead.
Right. I mean, it makes things like that hard.
Yeah. Okay.
Same with things like Outwit, right? If I want to Outwit before I retail, well, that's like a whole turn later.
That's 2 turns. Yeah. Okay. And then also, like as far as like starting area effects.
I don't remember how they work.
Yeah, it's something. It's something in the rules. Yeah, I know.
I think the short answer is none of them work.
Okay. Yeah, so that's really cool. I'm actually, I've never actually played because it's just been kind of intimidating for me to actually try skirmish, and every time I've gone to play skirmish, I always
It is complicated and has a lot of special rules.
yeah, and I was just like, well, I just want to play normal HeroClix, so I've done that instead.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I want to try it because they do make I know they make in the they've made a couple of maps. WizKids has made some maps in the starter set, like the JLU starter set is numbered, so you can get those. Also, Rock makes some neoprene maps with the numbers on them. I know they made the octagon and stuff like that, so that's kind of cool. And you don't necessarily have to have a numbered map. You could just like kind of do it yourself as well. But yeah, it looks pretty cool. It's also I know Antonio. Shout out to Antonio because he mentioned when Skirmish first came out, he mentioned that he invented that first. That he had the coin flip game where he would flip a coin and then wherever it would land, that's where he would place the figure during setup.
That's sort of the same idea.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same idea. So, yeah, cool. And so I mean, all of those formats are cool, but you mainly play 300 modern competitive. Have you?
I mean, I played bronze as well.
Oh, I play bronze. Okay, which is so that's mostly what Majestics does, right?
Yeah, that's the Majestic circuit. Yeah.
Okay. And how do you feel about that format, by the way? Because I know.
Oh, I love bronze. Like
I know
it's just so degenerate.
Yeah, it is degenerate. I've tried one Golden Age tournament my entire I haven't been playing that long. I've only been playing for like maybe 4 years, right? And I've only tried one Golden Age tournament, and I was just like, I got abused. Like.
Oh yeah. I mean, so the thing with it is, you have to be ready if you've been spending all your life, and then this is going to be an old school RTS analogy. So if I'm losing anyone, too bad. If you're playing Red Alert 2, and you've been playing months and months and months with no super weapons on, and all of a sudden you're playing a super weapons game for the first time, and someone nukes you 3 minutes in, and you're like, "What the hell just happened?" You're going to be like, "Okay, this is no fun." But once you get used to it and you understand like how you play against it and how you avoid getting nuked, then the format's really fun. Okay. And then the super weapons become just part of the game.
Okay, yeah, because I mean it's such a large pool of figures that you can have to figure out what's.
Oh yeah, and there's all sorts of hidden gems out there, like stuff that do weird, unique effects that you would never have considered before. Stuff that really needs to be banned that nobody's found yet. That you get to win a couple events with, and then everyone kind of goes, "Okay, we're done with that piece. Put it on the list."
And so for newer players out there, what's the difference between Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, and Modern Age?
So Silver Age isn't really a category. It's sort of a catch-all for whatever random thing someone's running, is my understanding. Golden Age is everything, in strictly speaking. Literally everything ever been printed that's actually HeroClix compatible. So that's everything all the way back to the pre-carded era, all that stuff. Silver Age, the way I've seen it used, is generally Golden Age with limitations on like no feats, no battlefields, no event dials, stuff like that. But otherwise is the same figure pool in terms of time. I think I've also seen it be used to be the carded era forward. So that's the Avengers set or the Legion of Superheroes starter forward. I've seen other versions of Silver Age be used for other categories. Bronze Age is what's also known as Oreo Age. So that's from Incredible Hulk. I think it's Superman forward, maybe. Superman before or after Incredible Hulk? One of those two. One of those two sets was the first Oreo dial set.
Okay.
And it's everything from that on. And then there's some limitations that are put on it. So, like, there's a ban list for a bunch of stuff you're just not allowed to play in the format. So, like, team bases are just banned outright, which I'm still shaking my fist at because I think plenty of those team bases are fine. There's a couple other problems.
I noticed they banned some newer figures like Legion
Yes.
and stuff like that.
Yes. Legion led to basically an infinite combo.
Okay.
Or close enough as makes minimal difference. And so he had to go. There's a bunch of them that are on there for various reasons. Usually because they have some weird interaction that exists that's just a problem. Some of them are just there because they're too strong. So like Bat Signal finally got added just because that thing is insane. Plastic Explosives got added very, very recently. That's an older resource item because it led to a particular set of combos that's just degenerate. And so, like, you're even when you're playing with super weapons, there are some things that basically everyone can agree are just too good. So you got to get rid of them, or they cause too much of a headache that nobody wants to deal with it. And those are the two main camps of stuff that comes off on that list. And then I think the other main restriction is like Yu-Gi-Oh! Traps and spells aren't allowed, just because those things have never been modern legal, and nobody wants to figure out how in the world they work. Because frankly, nobody knows. Even I don't. I have no idea what in the world they are or how they work, other than that they exist. I think Horde figures are just categorically banned, in part because they had really, really weird rule stuff that just aren't worth the headache.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. What was I think that was it. Those are the main, and then team bases is the other like category of things that's just off. And then the rest of it is individual game elements because of various reasons.
Okay, and then and so Majestics plays out of California, right? That's
I think they had a New York event.
Oh, they did.
So they have them all over the place, just not as like the most common are California, but I believe they have them elsewhere as well.
And so they do, and they're the ones that do. Are they the only ones that do? Well, no. I mean, you can
the Rock used to run what was called Rock Age. Okay. Which was just bronze. But I think that was when Pat was with them. And then I believe once they split up, the Rock never did them again. I don't know of any that they've done since then. So it's pretty much just Pat.
And so you pretty much play either 300 Modern or the Bronze Age with Majestics.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, yeah.
Have you always played competitively?
No, not when I first started. I mean, Anthony Barnsdale can attest to this. I still tried to play good stuff. I mean, I was always looking for, the most interesting and powerful stuff I could do in the format with the limited collection I had when we were kids. High school teenagers. I guess they're not really kids. They feel like kids now that I'm older. But no, I mean, I didn't play anything that competitive. I mean, I tried. I don't think I really did anything competitive with HeroClix until Anthony started asking me for assistance for him trying to, play at Nats and Worlds in 2012, 2011, somewhere around then.
So that's around the time that you started playing?
No. I started playing in 2005. Oh, wow. 2006.
Okay.
Yeah, I forget if Clix proper started in 2003. I definitely didn't start immediately, so I would have been 2 or 3 years in from when the game was started. But I mean, it was definitely like the relatively early days. So when I started playing, I mean, we just played casually locally. There was just a local comic book shop we played at. And I played like one game of it, and I was like, oh, this is a fun little actual like turn-based strategy game. I love those. I was obsessed with Fire Emblem. It's right up my alley. And then it happened to be in a comic book shop, so I eventually learned to like comics a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I mean, it wasn't anything like super competitive in terms of like the cutting edge of the meta stuff. Like we didn't know any of that stuff, so it's not like we could play it.
And what bridged your from playing kind of like learning and stuff like that? When did you first start getting competitive yourself?
I mean, I always liked to try and actually get the best chances of winning. Like that was always sort of part of the objective.
Yeah.
Of part of playing the game is doing that. in my world.
So like
Um,
entering tournaments and
I mean, I played some pre-releases when they happened way back when. That was pretty much it for a long time. What ended up happening is Anthony wanted to seriously try and win some of the major events. He asked me for some help with it, and so I helped him, theory craft and team build a bit and get some playtest games in. But that was about it. I mean, I didn't really actually start playing again until had completely left the game in 2009 until probably and then 2011 or so. Anthony hits me up and is picking my brain for what to play, and then I don't really start playing again until 2014. Uh, and that's when I basically came back in, and then I've been back since then.
all right. And so I mean this is just basically I think for a final question for today. I was going to ask. I asked this to Easton and George when I interviewed them as well, and I thought they had a good answer. My question was, if you could write your own HeroClix bio and kind of describe yourself as a HeroClix player, or have someone describe you as a HeroClix player, how would you describe yourself?
I think my HeroClix epitaph will probably say something along the lines of that jerk wouldn't just leave the rules alone. I think that's what it will say. That I mean, because more than anything else, I mean, the playing is fun and I enjoy the competitive events. But I'd like to think my biggest contribution, at least on sort of the back end, is a lot of the discussions on like some of the nitty gritty of the rules. I mean, some of my favorite stuff in HeroClix has been the conversations with various other rules people over the years. I mean, I've probably told the story a million times, but one of my favorite stories is in 2014 in a side event, the Yu-Gi-Oh side event. I went up to Rupp, who was the rules arbiter at the time, and I basically showed him an interaction where what happens is in the Yu-Gi-Oh format, if you mind controlled an opposing dark character and you had enough stuff KO'd, you could KO your opponent's character as a free action, essentially. It was mind control, kill your guy, I get a dude. And I was like, sounds like Yu-Gi-Oh to me, so this just works, right? And he just looks me in the eyes and he's like, Adam, we both know that's how that works. No.
Wait, so what?
So it didn't work. I mean,
About?
the answer is the rules may require that it works. It's not going to be allowed. It was what the answer was, which was, I think, the right answer, honestly. It was a silly interaction. It was one of those things that I'm not sure if it was an oversight or just wasn't even thought about. Just mind control was a weird power at the time. Mind control caused a lot of rules problems at the time.
Yeah.
Did up until today, and even today it causes some problems. It's one of the more confusing powers out there. And so, like the idea that kind of stuff happens in HeroClix and that there's weird rule stuff on the fringes. I love to go hunting for that stuff. I mean, that's really where I like a lot of the stuff the most, is finding those weird cases, bringing them up, seeing what the answer is. If it's confusing, working out what the best way to think about it is, all that kind of stuff. That's where I like this stuff.
Okay. Yeah. And have you ever judged before? I mean, you seem to have a really good grasp on the rules. Or
Oh, I judge people all the time.
so you're a judge. You're an official.
No,
judge.
no. That was a joke.
Oh.
Judge in the colloquial sense, not in the
Okay.
specific sense. Right? No, I really don't. I mean, if there's an event that I'm not playing in and someone needs a rules question, I'll go and help out. I mean, I help answer rules questions, and like when one of the bronze events is running, and I think Jeff normally runs them. If he happens to be busy for 20 minutes or something, he'll have me, babysit the pod. And if a rules question comes up, I might answer it. But in terms of actual judge staff, no, because you can't judge and play.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I definitely like the playing a little bit more.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. All right. So, Adam, thank you for joining us. Thank you for spending so much time. This was a longer interview, it seems like, but we definitely had a great conversation about HeroClix. Always love talking about HeroClix, and with the reigning, with the 2014 Nationals champion, 2020 Nationals champion, 2020 World champion, Adam Friedman. Thank you for joining us, and don't forget, everybody in HeroClix land, watching Coffee and Clicks, wake up and smell the clicks. And I'll Catch you later.